As my heir, William now assumes the Scottish titles which have meant so much to me. He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall.
The moment that should have been impossible just happened. A king didn't fall. He didn't fail. He chose to walk away. And that choice, it's sending shockwaves through every corridor of power, every whispered conversation behind palace walls, every carefully controlled narrative the world thought it understood. Because when King Charles III steps back at the exact moment he appears strongest, you have to ask, what does he know that we don't? An official statement was issued, calm on the surface, almost surgical in tone, but underneath it, something far more calculated was unfolding. Delivered through Princess Anne, a figure known not for drama but for discipline, the message wasn't just about preparation. It was about transition, a quiet declaration that the crown was already shifting hands, not in crisis, but in strategy. And that changes everything, because this wasn't abdication in desperation. This was timing, precision, control, the kind of move you make when the board is already set and every piece is exactly where it needs to be. Charles, painted as the architect of stability, didn't exit because he couldn't hold on. He stepped aside because he decided the moment had arrived. But arrived for what? For whom? And why now? The answer begins to form around one name, Prince William. Not as a future king anymore, but as the next move already in motion. The narrative being built is almost too perfect. Charles as the stabilizer, William as the accelerator. One builds the bridge, the other crosses it. But bridges don't appear overnight. They are built for a destination that already exists. And then there's Catherine, Princess of Wales, positioned not quietly, not subtly, but with almost surgical intent as the anchor of what comes next. Her rise isn't being described as opportunity, it's being framed as inevitability. A return, a correction, a restoration of something the institution believes it lost along the way. But restoration always implies something was broken. So what exactly needed fixing? The clues are buried in the details most people overlook. The robes, the jewels, the language used to describe fabric, thread, embroidery, as if they aren't just ceremonial pieces but coded signals. Princess Anne overseeing every stitch, every ounce of gold thread, every symbolic detail like a general preparing for a battle no one publicly acknowledges. This isn't fashion, this is messaging. The super tunica, the imperial mantle, these aren't just garments. They are being treated like historical documents, artifacts of power that must be recalibrated for a new era, inspected under lights, tested for how they will appear in high-definition global broadcasts. Think about that for a second. Not just worn, but engineered, optimized, controlled. Because this coronation, it isn't just tradition, it's performance. And every performance has a script. And suddenly, the secrecy that once defined these rituals is being peeled back. Details are being released early. Technical briefs shared. The public invited behind the curtain, but only just enough to see what they are meant to see. Transparency, yes, but controlled transparency. Because when you reveal everything, you're actually revealing nothing. Meanwhile, deep inside the machinery of the crown, something even more delicate is being handled. The past, specifically the parts of the past that don't fit the new narrative. The so-called correction era of Charles, quietly acknowledged as necessary, but now complete. Scandals managed, structures stabilized, a messy house cleaned before the arrival of its next occupant. And that's where the tension sharpens. Because cleaning a house often means removing things, or people, or influences that once held power but no longer fit the design. The phrase floating through insiders isn't loud, but it's there. A new beginning at peak structural integrity. Translation? This is as clean as it's ever going to get, which raises the most uncomfortable question of all. If everything is so stable, why move now? Because stability doesn't demand urgency, but strategy does. And as Princess Anne tightens her grip over every detail from security protocols to embroidery patterns, you start to see the shape of something bigger. Not just a coronation, not just a succession. A full-scale institutional reset disguised as continuity. A monarchy proving not that it survives change, but that it controls it. Every thread, every jewel, every word in that statement feels deliberate. Too deliberate. Like pieces of a puzzle laid out just enough for the world to admire, but not enough to fully understand. Because beneath the calm tone of that announcement, beneath the polished language of duty and service, there's a pulse of something else. Something faster, sharper, more urgent, a transition that didn't just begin, but may have been planned long before anyone realized it. And if that's true, then what we've just witnessed isn't the end of Charles's story. It's the beginning of something far more controlled. The deeper you go, the clearer it becomes. This was never just about a crown changing heads. It was about power being redefined in a way so quiet, so precise, that most people didn't even notice it happening in real time. Because while the world was still processing the idea that King Charles III would willingly step aside, the palace was already executing phase 2 of a plan that feels less like tradition and more like a controlled reset of the entire system. And right at the center of that reset stands one figure, calm, unshaken, almost surgical in her execution, Princess Anne. Not loud, not emotional, not seeking attention, but quietly becoming the most powerful operator in the room. Because what she's doing isn't ceremonial, it's structural, it's enforcement, the kind of authority that doesn't announce itself but reshapes everything beneath it. Seating charts, procession orders, access, visibility, these aren't minor details. These are signals. Signals about who matters now and who doesn't. And when those signals start excluding certain familiar names, the silence becomes louder than any official statement. Look closely, and you start to see it, the deliberate narrowing of the circle, the tightening of the monarchy into something smaller, sharper, almost clinical, a slimmed down institution, they call it. But slimming something down always means cutting things away. And the question nobody is asking loudly enough is, what exactly is being cut? Because while Prince William is being positioned as the face of a new era, focused, disciplined, almost reform-driven, there's another narrative unfolding quietly behind him, one that deals with influence, legacy, and the delicate removal of anything that doesn't align with this new vision of moral seriousness. And that's where the tension spikes. The term floating through palace corridors is careful, almost polite ceremonial neutrality. But when you strip that phrase down, what it really means is distance. Controlled distance, especially when it comes to Camilla. Her future role isn't being erased, not openly. It's being redefined, softly, strategically. A transition into what insiders are calling a respectful sunset. A phrase that sounds gentle, almost kind, but carries the weight of finality. Because once William ascends, her presence changes. Her influence contracts. The entourage, the access, the proximity to decision-making, all of it begins to fade into the background. Not because of scandal, not because of conflict, but because the system no longer has room for it. And that's what makes it so chilling. This isn't emotional, it's structural. And then, in sharp contrast, comes the rise of Catherine, Princess of Wales. Not just as a queen in waiting, but as a symbol. A carefully constructed embodiment of stability, legitimacy, and continuity. Every move she makes, every detail of her preparation is being elevated into something larger than personal identity. She's not being introduced as a successor. She's being presented as a correction. And that word, correction, keeps echoing through the language of the palace, through the restructuring of roles, through the silent removal of certain influences. It suggests that the past wasn't just complicated, it was flawed. And now, under this new blueprint, those flaws are being quietly erased. Even the regalia tells the story. The jewels chosen for Catherine, the historical stones pulled directly from the collection of Queen Elizabeth II, this isn't just about beauty or tradition, it's about lineage, about bypassing decades of controversy and reconnecting directly with the most stable, most respected era of the monarchy. It's a visual argument, a statement without words, a message that says this is the standard now. And while all of this unfolds, the machinery behind it keeps moving with almost unnerving precision. Meetings behind closed doors, financial structures being adjusted, estates transferred, the Duchy of Cornwall shifting hands not as a formality, but as a power move, granting William independence, control, the ability to operate without shadows from the past. This isn't inheritance, it's positioning. Even the question of the so-called exiled royals has been settled with a kind of cold clarity that leaves no room for interpretation. No roles, no ceremonial functions, no ambiguity. The gates, once slightly open, are now firmly closed. And the message behind that closure is unmistakable. This institution is no longer negotiating with its past. And yet, despite all this control, all this precision, there's something underneath it that feels unsettled, because when a system moves this perfectly, when every detail aligns this cleanly, it doesn't feel organic. It feels orchestrated, and orchestration always implies intention. So what was the real trigger? Was it truly about timing, about Charles recognizing the perfect moment to step aside, or was the moment created, shaped, engineered by forces within the institution that understood something the public doesn't? Because the more you examine it, the more it feels like this transition didn't begin with that official statement. It didn't begin with Anne's announcement. It didn't even begin with Charles's decision. It began long before, quietly, patiently, piece by piece, until the moment arrived where everything could shift at once without resistance. And now, as the world watches what looks like a seamless transition, the real story sits just beneath the surface. A monarchy that didn't just adapt, but recalibrated itself from the inside out. A family that didn't just pass on power, but redefined who was allowed to hold it. The crown will soon rest on William's head. The ceremony will be flawless. The images will be historic. The narrative will feel complete. But something about this story isn't finished, because when power moves this cleanly, this quietly, it usually means the most important parts of the story haven't been revealed yet.